What happens when you take war, this poison of humanity, the utter failing of all democracy that leads us even further and further into inevitable Armageddon? And you combine it with uwu. Well, then you get 2008's Valkyria Chronicles. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the biggest fan of anime. I watched about half the first season of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and the first episode of Goblin Slayer, which freaked me out so much I couldn't sleep for 3 days. However, in 2015, on the recommendation of a friend, I grabbed Valkyria Chronicles on Steam, just to give it a try and step outside my comfort zone a little bit. I'd never played something before in the anime kind of style, so a lot of the tropes and standards of the genre were completely new to me, as someone who was mostly used to Western style games outside of Nintendo. It took a little getting used to, but what I discovered was both a super fun tactical strategy game, as well as a surprisingly mature and incredibly well told story that still sticks with me now over 10 years later. Since that time I've also played and completed the 4th game, which I enjoyed thoroughly as well, but I've never gone back again to check out the original. So that's what we're doing today. My name is Nosemasher, and thank you for joining me today, as I welcome you to Valkyria Chronicles 17 years later. What did you think of Valkyria Chronicles? Let me know in the comments down below and see if we agree. Also be warned that this video will contain spoilers. Let's start off by looking at the setting for Valkyria Chronicles. The game is set on the continent of Europa, where a resource crisis over the precious mineral Ragnite that now powers most of the world has led to an all-out war between the two dominant sides. The Empire is a militaristic group of nations which dominates much of the eastern part of Europa, whilst the Atlantic Federation is a loose alliance of democracies that controls most of the western part of Europa. This war is known as the Second European War, or EW2, and if you look really closely, you might notice some vague similarities to our own real-world history. Okay, yeah, the setting isn't subtle in the slightest, it's just Europe during World War II with the map slightly skewed. The Empire are the Axis powers and the Federation are the Allies, it's pretty obvious. I don't really have a problem with this though, as I still think it's a really cool and interesting setting, and it also gives the story a much better opportunity to examine things about our own past wars, rather than trying to apply those things to a much more fantasy setting, such as games like Fire Emblem. The world has a lot of differences to our own, such as its technology, which is all based around this glowing blue Ragnar substance, which kinda gives it a steampunk feel, but like Ragnite. Ragnite punk? It makes the vehicles in game super interesting, as they'll have this glowing exhaust weak point, which is super fun to play around with. The armies themselves, for the most part, use normal looking guns, except for the anti-tank soldiers, who instead of using something like a real world bazooka, use a giant rocket firing launch, which looks super cool and gives it a real unique feel when you see these guys on the battlefield. The game goes for a super interesting art style as well, with the whole thing looking like it was almost drawn from a pencil and sketchbook. I honestly really love the look of this game, and it still really holds up almost 17 years later. Granted, I am playing on the PC version, which was upgraded to 1080p when it came to Steam, but still, you could tell me this game came out 5 years ago and I'd believe you. It looks really timeless. All of the UI and visuals just look like they fit together, and they really feel really unique to me, with this kind of fancy 1930s style. Especially the fonts, because goddamn, this game has some really lovely fonts. For most of the cutscenes and gameplay, there is this border around the edge of the screen which you may think starts to get quite annoying. However, after a few minutes, you don't really notice it anymore, and if anything, it just adds to the overall aesthetic of the game. Musically, the game is also very strong, with the main battle theme being an absolute joy to listen to.
I'll do my best. Stupid Imperials!
All troops advance.
As well as the boss theme, making me terrified like I'm facing bloody Satan himself. The characters also all look great, without going too over the top, which have definitely taken me out of it. There's nobody with giant purple hair or ridiculously elaborate character designs that just look out of place. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against designs like that at all, and they have their place. But in a serious game that deals with topics like war and prejudice, it would have been a bit distasteful. The female characters also aren't massively over-sexualized, which is nice to see. Apart from Silvara and her jiggle physics, because Jesus Christ. There's also so many little details that make me love the look. Like the comic Star Wars that pop up when you take actions like driving or shooting. There's really nothing else like it, or at least nothing that I've played. Let's now move on and discuss the best aspect of this game, the story. This isn't going to be a complete story recap, rather just an exploration of what the story does well and what can be improved, as well as some of my favourite moments. we'll be discussing the characters in depth in a later section of the video. So, which side do you play as during this resource war? Are we the autocratic Eastern Empire, or the democratic Western Atlantic Federation? Well, neither. Nestled between these two great warring powers is the peaceful and neutral country of Gallia. Gallia pulls from a lot of real-world countries, but is mostly based on places like Belgium and the Netherlands. What it does have, however, is a large quantity of Ragnite-rich ground, which, as you may remember, is the whole reason why the war started in the first place. So because of this, Gallia is then invaded by the Empire, aiming to quickly conquer this much smaller country and claim all of its Ragnite for use in the quote-unquote real war with the Federation. But what the Empire was met with was a country that would not take this line down. The game begins in the small Gallian town of Brawl, where we meet our main character, Welkin Gunther. He has returned to his hometown to help evacuate his younger sister Asara, as Imperial forces will soon be upon the town. He is then held at gunpoint by one of the town's guardsmen, a girl called Alicia, as she believes he's a spy. As he's clearing his name, the town is suddenly attacked by a small group of Imperial scouts, so Welkin assists the town guard in fighting back. When he returns to his childhood home, Asara is about to be shot. However, with Welkin's help, she manages to dispatch them both. She then reveals that her father's old tank from the First European War is still located in the garage, and that she's been working on it to keep it fully functional. Welkin and Asara then use this tank, named the Edelweiss, to rescue Alicia and help the rest of the townsfolk escape rule. Inspired by this to help protect their country, the three of them then join the Gallian militia together, with Welkin being assigned as the leader of Squad 7. Alongside other prominent squad members Rosie and Largo, the rest of the game focuses on the missions of Squad 7 and their efforts to help repel the invading Imperial threat and save their homeland. This setup honestly works so well in making you care about Gallia and its people. We all like playing as the underdog, and Squad 7 are initially treated like barely an inconvenience by both the Imperial forces and even by the main Gallian army. But mission after mission, they prove everybody wrong and pull out some incredible victories, both due to their closeness as a squad and Wilkins' tactical genius like driving a tank along the bottom of a shallow riverbed to surprise the enemy. The game is presented in the framing device of a storybook, being written after the war by a journalist following Squad 7, and because of this, the game doesn't just go straight from one cutscene to the next without player input. Instead, the game is split up into chapters, with each one having multiple cutscenes and usually around 1 or 2 battles, meaning the player can play the game at their own pace and rewatch any cutscene at any time should you come back to the game after a few months and figure out what the story is. Which, side note, really bloody annoys me when games don't have some kind of journal or story recap to remind me what's happening if I haven't played in a while, so it's very much appreciated here. It feels very ADHD friendly as well, as you're not presented with 30-minute long cutscenes like in Metal Gear Solid. Instead, each cutscene is presented as part of this book, and watching one then unlocks the next. There's even optional cutscenes that aren't required viewing, but can add extra context to the world and story. It just made it a lot more digestible to me to take each cutscene as a bite-sized chunk that I can rewatch if I felt I missed something. And if you're interested in learning more about what kind of things make gaming with ADHD easier, then click here to check out my video on that exact topic. One of the most important things I think this game makes very clear at the start is that it takes the war very seriously. It's not some kiddie fun play fight where people just get injured. No, when the Imperials invade Brule, you see innocent unarmed civilians get gunned down. You hear the soldiers threatening Asara, saying they're going to kill her, despite her only being a 16-year-old girl. Huh. Reminds me of someone, but I just can't put my finger on it. The game is very anti-war, and doesn't shy away from how awful and destructive it is for everyone involved. And just because it's not rated mature with rivers of blood everywhere, doesn't make it any less impactful to me. The game also isn't completely black and white, with the good guy Federation and Gallia versus the evil Empire. The Empire certainly do a lot of fucked up shit, but the Federation also attempts to kidnap your princess to force you to join their alliance. Even Gallia isn't presented as fully good, as the Prime Minister attempts to seize power from the princess by selling out Gallia to the Empire. And the general of the Gallian army is an incompetent fuckwit who makes dumb military decisions and speaks down to the militia as if they're beneath him. And of course, because it's a World War II game, we need a bit of racism in there just to lighten the mood. You may have noticed that when the soldiers were preparing to kill Asara, they called her a Darkson. This is because her and Welkin aren't actually blood related. Instead, Isara's parents died when she was just a baby, and so Welkin's father, who was himself a great war hero, adopted her. Isara and her birth father are known as Darksons, an ancient race of people who were born with dark hair and eyes. Darksons are seen as untrustworthy by a lot of the world's population, due to them supposedly causing a calamity thousands of years ago, with the world being saved by the Valkyria. Because of this, they're treated as second-class citizens and frequently called the slur, dark hair. The Empire especially hates Darksons, with them being frequently killed by hunting parties, and the ones they captured being put into concentration camps. That's not me saying that, that's literally what they're called in-game. Like with the rest of the setting, it's not very subtle who these are an allegory for, as they're clearly a stand-in for the Jewish people. And thankfully, this part of the game is handled incredibly maturely and respectfully. And putting it into this context really does show how small-minded and stupid racism is. These people are hated for no other reason than the colour of their hair and some vague event that happened thousands of years ago. And later in the story, it's even discovered that it's a lie, and that the Valkyria were the bad guys, who then blamed the Darksons for the atrocities that they committed. It's a super well done part of the game, and I'm genuinely curious what Jewish players thought about how it was handled. So please leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Heading back to the story, during Chapter 5, after a few victories for Squad 7, we're then introduced to our main villain of the game, son of the Emperor and leader of the Gallian invasion, Maximilian. A psychotic and stuck-up royal, hell-bent on the destruction of the Gallian people. We also meet his generals and future bosses, Gregor, Jaeger, and Salvaria. It's great that we're given an insight into the villains and their perspective on the invasion from the opposing side. They really treat Gallia like it's a joke and just expect to roll straight through to the capital. Especially because Salvaria maybe more than meets the eye. We see this during the next chapter, where Max and Salvaria meet Squad 7 in person and challenge them to a fight. This is when Salvaria is revealed to be a Valkyria, an ancient race of people that are thought to be long extinct. When a Valkyria holds a sacred artifact, such as an ancient lance and shield, they're able to wield extraordinary power. Against all odds, Squad 7 barely managed to pull out a victory against both Maximilian's giant tank and the awesome power of the Valkyria. The Valkyria are such an interesting addition to this game, as the world of Europa is still pretty grounded with no kind of magic or people with supernatural powers. So when this basically god walks out into the field, it's fucking terrifying. Can you imagine being a soldier during World War II, you and your men holding out against a German offensive, when suddenly half your squad are killed by a giant energy blast from a lady that bounces bullets off like they're nothing? Like, how the hell do you fight against something like that? Moving forward to Chapter 8, we have possibly my favourite cutscene in the whole game, and one of the main inspirations for me wanting to make this video. Alicia and Welkin have been separated from the rest of the squad in this forest, and Alicia has hurt her ankle. They take refuge in this abandoned cabin and fall asleep, when they're suddenly awoken by the sound of an approaching person. They ready their guns for an Imperial assault, when a soldier walks in and collapses onto the floor. He's badly wounded and almost certainly going to die. Alicia and Welkin try and help as best they can, but his wounds are too severe. In his dying moments, Alicia comforts him, pretending to be his mother as he calls out to her.
Mother.
It's okay. Don't be afraid. Mother's right here. Everything's fine. See?
Yes. It's...
The next morning, after they bury him, they are approached by the Imperial Soldiers squad, who thank the pair for trying to help him. This whole interaction is one of the most profoundly human things I've ever seen in a game. Alicia and Welkin talk about how they saw Imperials as these evil monsters, but after seeing this soldier cry out for his mother, they see that he's just like them, a normal person with friends and family fighting for his home. The conversation they have with the enemy officer really goes a long way in humanizing the Imperials they've spent the whole game up until now fighting against. It would have been an extra big gut punch if you had to kill this enemy officer later in the game, but sadly he never reappears. I'd love to see future Valkyria Chronicles 5 take place from the perspective of an Empire squad, as that would be such an interesting change of pace to see how they view the war. They sort of tried this in Valkyria Chronicles 4, but massively half-assed it. I love that game, but they really messed up the whole point of the narrative change. If I ever make a video on that game, I'll go into more depth on it. Heading back to the narrative, the next major battle you partake in is in the liberation of the city of Falzen. This is where the story gets pretty damn heavy, as you see the Darkson concentration camps in full, and it's pretty bleak when after their defeat, the Empire decides to massacre the camps as they flee. This game may have some fun moments and dialogue, but it really knows how to deliver a gut punch when it needs to. After witnessing something like this, it's pretty understandable that Squad 7 is given some time off. So we can of course have a beach episode, let's go! What the fuck are you wearing, Welkin? The game has these optional side chapters called reports that you can buy with in-game money. They usually take place at an early point in the story, so sometimes it can be hard to put yourself back in the headspace of when they actually happened and remember the context around them. For the most part, they each revolve around one of the main characters and are a lot of fun. The beach one especially is just really feel good and has some great character moments. Okay, well now that we've gone through all that awfulness, surely the next few chapters are a bit more upbeat and lighthearted.
Isara. Down! No. Isara! Don't you die on me, Isara!
The death of Isara both marks a halfway point of the story and also a shift in the tone of the game. The second half is a lot less cheerful as the gravity of the war starts to really weigh down on the characters, especially Welkin, who just lost his sister. Remember that Isara is only 16 years old, a child who was just gunned down without a second thought. And in the next battle of the game, it looks like history is about to repeat itself, as an unseen sniper shoots Alicia. However, something is different this time. As she lays there dying, a stranger comes up and places a Valkyrian artifact on her. We then see Alicia walk out into the battlefield covered in a fiery blue flame. Alicia is revealed to be a Valkyria. Her and Selvaria have a proper anime style duel, which is fucking sick, and Alicia absolutely pummels her. There are clues of Alicia being a Valkyria before the reveal, which if you're a super smarty pants like me, you'll pick up on. Such as the door on the Valkyria temple in a previous chapter, only opening when she approached it. But the thing is, somebody else noticed it too. The next chapter is a report that shows that Welkin's friend and leader of Squad 1, Folio, who was also at the temple, had discovered this about Alicia and decided to unleash her Valkyria powers on the enemy by any means necessary. This is because he discovers some ancient writing which states that Valkyria can only awaken their power on the brink of death, which is why he shot Alicia. I'll go more into it when we get to him in the character section, but I'll just say it right here and now. Folio did nothing wrong! Skipping ahead a bit, the war appears to be all but won for the Garleans. They've pushed the Empire out of their borders and even captured one of the enemy generals, Selvaria. But the Empire has two more tricks up their sleeve. Selvaria uses her powers to cause a massive explosion which wipes out most of the main Garlean army. There's possibly some symbolism here to the atomic bombs dropped on Japan, or I could be reading too much into it like a GCSE English lesson. And the other trick is a huge fuck-off tank called the Marmota that begins hurtling itself towards the capital city of Rangres. The Marmota is insanely cool, and one of my favourite aspects of this series where you go up against these just ridiculously over-the-top machines of war.
It's one ridiculous tank after the other for these people.
Despite the efforts of the militia, they're unable to stop it. Seeing this, Alicia awakens her Valkyria powers, and after throwing her lance through the side of the giant tank, plans to blow herself up like Selvaria to stop the Marmota. But she is stopped by Welkin, who declares his love for her and talks her down. This is just an incredibly sweet moment after they spend the whole game crashing on each other. The Marmota then barrels straight into the Garlean capital, and it is revealed what Maximilian's plan is. He somehow has found out that Castle Rangres hides a deep secret. An absolutely colossal Valkyrian lance called Valkov, built right into the castle's tallest spire. Wielding this incredible weapon, he can reduce half of Europa to ash as the flames of his judgment cleanse the land. If Squad 7 don't destroy it here and now, there won't be a world to save anymore. It truly is an epic feeling final battle to destroy this weapon of mass destruction. But thanks to the damage that Alicia caused early with her lance, the squad is able to board and destroy the Valkov once and for all. But there is still the matter of Prince Maximilian to deal with. As the squad make their way up to the top deck of the Marmota, Maximilian emerges from the Codevator and shares his plan to take over the whole empire and essentially destroy the entire Western world. And to achieve this, he's used technology to make himself into an artificial Valkyria. So let me get this straight. We have a truly epic setup for a final boss, the entire world at stake, and an entire game's worth of skills we've built up for this final fight. Surely this just has to be amazing. I'm going to tell my grandkids about it, right? Right? Dear God, this is one of the biggest facepalms of a final boss fight I've ever seen. It's not just disappointing or mediocre, it actively makes me want to tear my hair out with how frustrating, tedious, and RNG based it is. I hated it in 2016 when I first played it, and 9 years later, I still absolutely fucking hate it. It doesn't ruin the whole game for me, but it does really put a dent on an otherwise very narratively satisfying end to it. After Max has been finally defeated, he prepares to do the same as Selvaria and Alicia and detonates himself, taking the whole of Squad 7 with him. But at the last moment, his power is disconnected by none other than Folio, who managed to escape from his prison cell and sneak aboard the enemy ship. You couldn't have done that 15 minutes ago and saved me from that dogshit boss fight, Folio! Anyway, Folio feels so terrible what he did to Alicia that he sacrifices himself to take out Maximilian once and for all. After he does this, the entire battleship begins to explode, trapping Alicia and Welkin with no way to escape. As they accept their fates, they are saved by their engineer Leon, who had finished building the aeroplane prototype that Asara had been working on, allowing them to soar through the sky and hopefully into a more peaceful future. Ignoring the actual boss fight mechanics, this whole ending I just absolutely adore. Max turning himself into a fake Valkyria powered by science is such an amazing idea. And seeing the way it changes his body with his eyes growing pure white and all these gross veins appearing across his skin make it seem like he's really not even human anymore at this point. Alicia and Welkin being saved by Asara's creation is honestly such an emotional moment to feel like she's still with them even in death. It's the one moment I always remembered about this game. We then get some text in the credits saying what all the major squad members did after the war, and it's all very sweet. And that's the main story of Valkyria Chronicles. I hesitate to call it the best part of this game because the combat is so good, but it's the thing I most remember this game for. I love the fact that it takes itself seriously and doesn't shy away from certain things like the persecuted Darksons or your closest friends being killed in the blink of an eye with nothing you can do to help them. Whilst yes, the dialogue is pretty corny at times and can be easily made fun of for feeling rather surface level, I appreciate its sincerity and simple messages of anti-war and anti-racism, which in today's world are becoming controversial takes somehow. I love all the characters, and by the end, Squad 7 really does feel like a family who's been through hell and back together. It's a very special story to me, and one I hope you'll also want to experience after watching this video. So, how would I describe the gameplay of Valkyria Chronicles? Basically grab Fire Emblem, XCOM, Gears of War, World of Tanks, and Sniper Elite, shove them into a big blender, turn it on, and you'll come up with something vaguely resembling Valkyria Chronicles. The game uses something called the Blitz system for its combat, which stands for Battle of Live Tactical Zones. Whatever the fuck that means. Basically, on your turn, you see a bird's eye map view of the battlefield, where you can see all your troops represented as these circles, alongside any enemies that your troops have spotted. Up here on the top, you have your command points, also known as CP, which as an acronym has aged incredibly poorly. Selecting one of your troops uses up 1 CP and puts you in direct third-person control of them. From here, you can move them around and take one action. The AP bar at the bottom shows how far you can move them, and how much they have is based off their soldier class. Taking an action means using one of your soldiers' equipment pieces. Whether this means shooting with your gun, throwing a grenade, or something else, it's up to you. Once you finish a soldier's turn, you return up to the battlefield map overview, where you can select another soldier to move. However, unlike a game like XCOM, where each soldier can only be used once per turn, in Valkyria Chronicles, you're only limited by how much CP you have, so you can either use each troop once, or blow all of them on using one soldier multiple times in your turn. But be warned, each time you use a soldier more than once on a turn, they'll have less and less AP. So if you try and move them like 5 times, they'll basically only be able to move like 2 centimeters. Soldiers can do actions like crouching or capturing flags as many times as they want. It's only the use of targeting mode that they can only do once per CP. Targeting mode is how your soldiers do things like shooting and healing. Rather than something like XCOM where shots are percentage-based chances to hit, Valkyria is completely free aiming, so you can shoot at nothing or even your own allies if you want to. Having a gun selected and then hitting a shoot will cause your soldier to fire off how many shots their gun uses, and they will all hit at some point in this circular area. Usually you want to aim for the head, as that does critical damage unless the enemy is crouched. When aiming at an enemy, you can see how many shots it will take to kill. This takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, meaning you can plan your turns more easily if you know for certain you can take out this enemy. Unless you're fighting a boss, in which case, you haven't got a fucking Scooby. Additionally, when aiming an attack, you may see another character's name appear at the top right corner. This means that when you fire, an ally will also fire at that enemy in a cooperative attack, allowing you to set up some devastating combos. Once you've ended your turn, then the enemy take theirs. You do see each individual enemy troop make their move, which some people don't like, but I really like it as it easily lets me keep a mental track of where they all are. Now, all of this sounds pretty simple and easy to play, until you find out about interception fire. Basically, every troop has a combat range around them. This is usually the effective range of their weapon, and if any enemy moves into this range and they can see them, they'll begin firing at them. If you're an XCOM player, then yes, this basically means that every single unit is on permanent overwatch. And not only that, if you shoot an enemy and don't finish them off, they can counter you and get a completely free attack on you. When I tell you that this game can get stressful, it gets pretty fucking stressful. Especially when you start your turn, and the second you get control of your soldier, like 3 machine gunners start lighting you up. So you really need to be on the ball with your reaction times, or your guys aren't lasting very long. Thankfully, entering targeting mode stops all interception fire, so you can aim in relative peace. But then the second you finish firing, you need to end your turn as quickly as possible, as they will immediately start firing you again the second you get control. The nice thing is, this works both ways. So if you have loads of guys all standing next to each other and an enemy walks nearby, then you get to just absolutely decimate them. And because the AI isn't great sometimes, you can get like 3 or 4 free kills from just enemies rushing at you and getting mowed down. They are smart enough to usually end their turn when getting fired at, however, so it's not a completely broken system. This combat system is really unique, and the closest thing I can compare it to is XCOM, even then it's quite a bit different. It honestly never really gets boring, as the game constantly ramps up the difficulty each mission and throws new challenges at you all the time. Like, you think you finally get used to the game, but surprise bitch, now the enemies have— oh, I touched the mic, fuck. Like, you think you finally got used to the game, but surprise bitch, now the enemies have flamethrowers which ignore crouching. And this isn't an easy game in the slightest. Later levels, and especially the boss fights, get pretty damn difficult, and I had to repeat some missions multiple times. Heading back to the map view screen, most missions will start off with you having open slots, which you can fill with any combination of soldiers that you want. Fancy bringing along 4 snipers? Hell yeah, go right on ahead. Mission objectives vary quite a lot, but it will usually be one of 3 things: capture the enemy's base camp, take out a specific enemy, or have a soldier reach a certain point on the map. You can lose missions in a few different ways, but the main ones are taking too many turns to complete the mission. This usually sits around 20 turns, but unless you're going ridiculously slow, then you won't usually need more than 10. Losing all of your troops, including reserve troops. Basically if your entire squad dies, in which case you're basically fucked for future missions anyway. If Vulcan's tank gets destroyed, which can happen quite easily if you don't protect the weak spot on its rear. Or if the enemy captures your base camp. Scattered throughout most of the maps are these camps, with the one that has the star on it being your base camp. This is where your troops spawn in when the mission starts. Capturing these allows you to both stop the enemy calling reinforcements, and for you to call in reinforcements yourself. Although you can't have more troops than you started the mission with, so this is mostly just for if you have a soldier fall in battle and you need to replace them. Being inside a camp also gives you a bunch of benefits, such as increased healing and free ammo. The enemy can and will attempt to capture back their camps, so make sure you protect them, as a camp cannot be captured if there's an ally in it. If the enemy does capture your base camp, however, you will lose the mission. I swear to God, the amount of times I've been slaughtering them all, only to have a shitty little scout sneak around and capture my base camp because I forgot to leave someone there, it's pretty embarrassing. The game has 6 different classes of troops for you to use. First up is the Scout, which has by far the highest AP of any unit, allowing them to cover very long distances in a single turn. They also have the ability to detect nearby enemies a lot easier than other classes. So these are the guys you want to bring along if you're searching for enemies in tall grass like their Pokemon. Combat wise they're pretty decent and can easily take soldiers out with some well placed shots to the head. However, any sustained fire on them can take them out fairly easily. They are equipped with a rifle, grenades, and like every other class, they have a Ragnade, which is basically a medkit which can be used on themselves or other soldiers. When soldiers reach level 11, they become elite, and this gives the scouts an added grenade launcher. Next up is the Shock Trooper. These are like your frontline heavies, able to take damage and then dish it back out. Their weapon of choice is the machine gun, which whilst firing a ton of shots and dealing heavy damage, also has a very short range, meaning they need to get right up and close to the enemy to be effective. This also means that it's easy to take them out from afar, as they won't be able to counter shoot back. They don't have much in terms of AP either, so they are difficult to position properly, but if you can get one in, they can devastate the battlefield in close quarters combat. When they hit elite, they gain flamethrowers, which completely ignore cover bonuses and can hit multiple enemies at once. Up next, we have the Lancer. These are your anti-tank guys wielding a large rocket launcher. These guys are very important because this game has an absolute shitload of tanks, and if you rely purely on your own tanks to take them out, then you'll be wasting a hell of a lot of command points. Instead, if you can maneuver a Lancer behind an enemy tank and hit them in the weak spot, you'll pretty reliably take them out in one hit majority of the time, unless it's something like a boss. This doesn't mean Lancers are completely useless against infantry though. If you can get in close, which is easier thanks to their high HP, then you can just point blank range blast these soldiers in the face with your big boomstick of justice. This all sounds excellent, but they do have some downsides. For one, they have very low AP, meaning they will require multiple moves to cover any kind of reasonable distance. Additionally, they can't use any kind of interception fire or cooperative attacks, meaning enemy soldiers can just walk right up to them and blast them in the face. However, even if they could intercept fire, it wouldn't really do much because Lancers have god-awful accuracy. Trying to hit anything at medium to long range is an absolute task and really not worth it. Especially because they also have limited ammo, starting off with 3 projectiles and regaining 1 each turn. Elite Lancers get access to Mortar Lancers, which are anti-infantry versions of their normal weapons that are like big grenade launchers. However, I've never really found these particularly useful, so I don't use them at all. Moving on, we have the Engineers. This is basically your all-in-one support class. Engineers carry the same rifle as Scouts, but also carry 3 grenades instead of just 1 like other classes. Additionally, they have a unique piece of equipment called the Engineer Tool, which allows them to repair allied vehicles and sandbags, as well as removing mines. Engineers also carry an improved form of Ragnade, which can heal more HP. as well as the ability to replenish an ally's ammo by touching them. As you can see, the Engineer has a lot going on, and is an essential class to bring on pretty much any mission. They excel in a support role, but in an offensive role, they're basically just a less effective scout, with less AP, less health, and lower accuracy. Next is the Sniper. These are your long-range specialists, with the ability to take out enemies from halfway across the map with a single bullet. Snipers are equipped with the sniper rifle, which fires a single deadly shot with a massive range, eliminating most enemies with a single headshot provided they aren't in cover. Snipers are a lot more situational, and they aren't always useful, especially in small maps or levels that require a lot of movement, as they have the smallest AP out of all the classes. They also have very poor defenses, and like Lancers, lack both interception and corruptive fire, as well as having limited ammo. Unlike other classes, snipers feel a lot more RNG based when it comes to their shots, as what you're aiming at is so far away, it's basically a 50-50 coin toss whether you'll hit it or not, which can lead them to feeling quite frustrating sometimes. Don't get me wrong though, I still really enjoy using them and they're arguably my favourite class to play. It's just that their downsides are a lot more obvious than the others. And lastly, we have the tank commanders. These play a bit different than the other classes, as there are only 2 of them, and they are a permanent fixture on your squad that have to be deployed every mission. You start with Welkin and the Edelweiss from Chapter 2 onwards, and then you gain Zake and the Shamrock around halfway through the game. Tanks differ quite a lot from regular units. Firstly, they require 2 command points to use instead of just 1, so you have to be extra sure that you want to use them. Secondly, they are immune to any small arms fire, from anywhere but their critical weak point in the rear. Thirdly, they cannot do normal troop actions like capturing camps. And fourthly, they have 2 separate health bars, that being body and treads. If the body is destroyed, then the whole tank is lost. However, if the treads are destroyed, it just dramatically lowers your tank's AP. This is a cool idea in theory, but in practice it almost never comes into play. It's a far better idea to just shoot the main body of the tank and kill it as fast as you can. In my whole playthrough, my treads only got destroyed once, and that was on the final mission of the game. And even then, you can just repair them with an engineer anyway. The tanks just had a hell of a lot of fun in this game, and really give you that feeling of being an unstoppable juggernaut that can just tank, pun intended, all these bullets without getting a flying fog. They're not invincible, however, as if you don't protect their weak point, they can be easily taken out by a lone lancer, which does make them feel somewhat balanced. Plus the fact that they take double the command points and can't fit into tight spaces means you can't just spam their attacks everywhere. The Edelweiss has 3 different weapons in its loadout. First up is this main cannon, which can fire anti-tank shells for tank versus tank combat. Then there's the mortar, which is great for taking down groups of infantry. And finally, the machine gun, which can be used for single troops as well as interception fire and cooperative attacks. The Shamrock is a bit different, as it's a smaller and less armoured tank, but it also has 3 different loadout choices. The first being the same as the Edelweisses, the second being a big Gatling gun alongside the normal machine gun, and the third being a big flamethrower alongside the normal machine gun. Whilst this may seem like a cool addition, for the most part the other 2 loadouts I just find fairly useless. The default machine gun already kills infantry in a single burst, and you already have a mortar which can do splash damage to multiple targets. All you're really doing is taking away its anti-tank abilities, so I'd recommend just sticking with the default loadout and treating it like a mini Edelweiss. It would have been cool to give it a much more unique identity, like it being smaller means it can go into places the Edelweiss can't, or some kind of actually useful alternative weapon like a long-range rocket barrage. And whilst the tanks are fun to use, dear god, the keyboard and mouse tank controls are total dog shit. It's hard to explain, but like the tank will follow in the direction of your mouse, but it also turns on its own when using the mouse. I've watched friends try and play this game and just become infuriated by the tank controls, so be warned it is something you have to learn to work around. There are also some issues with enemy tanks, like the fact that they will get stuck on small inclines and just not move anywhere, or their tank shells having pixel perfect accuracy, which means they can snipe troops from halfway across the map, whilst my tanks couldn't hit a fucking mountain-sized dragon that's standing more than 10 feet away! So, how do you recruit these soldiers? Well, in Valkyria Chronicles, every single soldier you can pick from is pre-made and fully voiced, with their own background and personality. Your squad can hold up to 20 soldiers, including the 3 main characters that you can't remove. However, there are a total of 50 characters that you can choose from for your squad, meaning you could do 2 full playthroughs with a completely different set of troops each time and still not see them all. This gives you some insane replay value, as it can give the battles a very different feel depending on who you bring. And you may very well learn to love some, and also learn to completely despise others. Luckily, you can swap out squad members whenever you want, so you don't have to stick with someone annoying. Not all of them are unlocked at the start though. I believe that the way that it works is that you get a random set of them at the start of your playthrough, and then more will be added if you choose from throughout the course of the game. There are also some secret characters that can only be unlocked by doing special things, which is really cool. For example, if you let the sniper Oscar get downed, then his brother will get worried about him and join the squad. And he should be worried, because in fact your soldiers can die permanently. When their health reaches 0, they will be downed and can no longer fight. You then have 3 turns to reach them and get a medical evac, or else they die and are permanently removed from the game. They can also die if they get downed and then come into contact with the enemy. Main characters are immune from permanent death, they just aren't available for the rest of the battle. This isn't all just window dressing either. Every single soldier has unique stats and unique potentials. Each character has 2 sets of what's called potentials, which are basically like traits. The first set are their personal potentials, which can be both good and bad, and make the soldier feel a lot more like an actual person. These can be things like having a bad back so they have worse defense when they crouch, or getting a stat boost from being around another character that they like. And the second set are battle potentials, which are always positive and are based on the character's class. For example, snipers can have extra shot, which gives them a chance to get another bullet after they fire their last one. Potentials are such an awesome addition to this game as it makes each soldier's personality matter in combat as well. Some can be really useful and make a soldier an absolute imp-killing machine, and some can be potentially disastrous. Like here, when my engineer Claudia went up to get an easy kill on an enemy lancer. However, this time it triggered her unlucky potential, which means she can't do any critical hits. If I really needed this kill, it could have ended the entire level, but that's what makes these characters so interesting. There's some really creative ones, and it's not like there's only 10 potentials that are shared throughout all 50 characters. One of my favourites is the character Noche, who initially doesn't have a fourth personal potential. However, when Welkin declares his love for Alicia, Noche gets the potential of Welkin Hater because he has a crush on Alicia, so his stats go down when he goes near him. The main characters also have their own personal potentials, but these ones will actually shift and change throughout the course of the story, which is a really cool way of a character arc actually reflecting in the mechanics of the game. I'll go more into depth on these when we get to the character section. All of this sounds like a lot of fun, and it really is, but none of this would matter if the game didn't have some absolutely fantastic levels and objectives to use these mechanics in. And thankfully, Valkyria Chronicles has some of the best level design I've ever played. Almost every single one of these has some kind of unique mechanic or clever angle that separates it from the rest. There are very few just go and fight the enemy missions without something throwing you off. I'm not going to go through every mission as that would take bloody hours, so here's just a few of my favourites. Chapter 6 takes place in a desert, which is a nice change of pace from the mostly forest and urban settings of the last few missions. This place is heaven for snipers, which is unlucky because the enemy also has quite a few, so stay on your toes. The way to the enemy base is lined with these trenches, which gives the level a much more different feel, as if you leave a soldier out of a trench, then they'll almost certainly get picked off by an enemy sniper. The level will also have some sandstorms that roll in occasionally, giving you a good chance to make some ground under its cover. The next level, Chapter 7, also gives you the first taste of a proper boss fight, and dear god, the bosses in this game are absolutely fucking terrifying. Not only do you have to deal with Maximilian's mega tank of death, but also the Valkyria Silvara running around who can absolutely annihilate your soldiers with her cross-map 360 no-scope interception fire. What I like about this boss is it isn't just a normal enemy with a health bar you have to whittle down. It will slowly move forward every turn and you have to take it down before it reaches your base camp and causes a game over. To defeat it, you must knock down these big pillars into its path, which causes it to have to use its giant main cannon to clear them out. After this, its large radiators open up, which gives you an opportunity to board it and throw a grenade in to take them out. Sounds relatively easy, right? Well, consider that the tank is armed to the teeth with both anti-infantry and anti-tank guns, meaning you need to take these out to get anywhere near it, and also be absolutely shredded like cheese on a lovely pasta dish. And even if you manage to take out these guns, you still have Silvara to deal with, who sprints around the battlefield taking out your soldiers and being completely immune to any damage. And then, throw on the fact that you still have to contend with the normal amount of troops, makes this mission an absolute bitch to deal with. I finally managed to defeat it by using my tank to block Silvara's interception fire, so I get my troops in close enough to chuck the grenades in. This wasn't without casualties however, as we lost our first soldier of the campaign, a lancer called Jan. That's something else to bring up. This game isn't a walk in the park at all, especially if you're not used to the mechanics. If you make a mistake, like leaving a soldier out in the open or running headfirst into enemy interception fire, you could become quickly pretty screwed. But that's another reason why I love it, because I like harder games. And some of the later missions have me restarting over and over again due to silly mistakes that I would make. Especially in the later parts of the game, it can get really challenging and forces you to develop your tactics, as the enemies get access to more advanced weaponry like mortars. Chapter 8 Part 2 is another example of an interesting level concept, where Welkin and Alicia start off the mission separated from the rest of the squad by a large valley. Because of this, the Edelweiss has no commander, so it can't be used. However, the main part of the squad is being assaulted by a massive force, so you need the Edelweiss to help defend and counterattack. It leads to this really interesting scenario. We have to carefully decide where to spend your CP, as obviously your main goal is getting Alicia and Welkin back to the main squad, but if you spend it all on them, then the main squad will get absolutely demolished, so it's a really fun level. Also, fuck the landmines. This is the first mission where I got killed by an anti-infantry landmine, and it makes you feel like a complete idiot. I'm not saying it's a bad mechanic at all because it forces you to adapt to them and bring an engineer to clear them out, but fuck me it isn't frustrating to be running along and suddenly get blown 20 feet away. Chapter 9 is also a very unique one, because the Gallian princess has been kidnapped by the Atlantic Federation forces and you have to rescue her. This is the only mission where you're not fighting against the Empire, which is really cool and I wish there were more of these in the game. The princess is in a car and being moved towards the docks when Squad 7 intercepts. The whole level has this cool nighttime industrial feel which I really love and almost makes it feel like a DLC mission because of how different it is. You can't use any explosives on the car as that would risk hurting her, so you can only do damage to the car with normal bullets. The Edelweiss still has a use, however, as you can use it to block the streets to force the car to take a longer route to its destination point. Okay, I get it. We stop the car and then use our troops to whittle down its health as it makes its way through the docks. What a sick level concept. Okay, let me just take the first shot and... Oh. Was that it? I destroyed the car in one machine gun blast right as the level was getting interesting. What the hell happened? And here, folks, is when I sadly realised an absolutely huge flaw in this game that effectively ruins a lot of the combat and the more interesting level concepts. You see, before I had Rosie attack the car, I used an order. Orders are something that you can use from the map screen. They each cost a different amount of CP to use and can range from giving your troops stat boosts to calling down mortar strikes on your enemies. And sadly, they are horrendously unbalanced. In this instance, I used the Demolition Order, which greatly increases a unit's anti-tank power and costs 3 CP. Is this a bad idea in concept? Of course not. Loads of games have special bonuses that you give to your characters to give you an edge in battle. However, the ones in Valkyria Chronicles have 2 major problems. 1, they are way too powerful. And 2, they are infinite use. Once you discover how powerful orders are, they are basically mandatory to constantly spam every mission. Take this example. I put a defend order on Largo here, and you can then take like 4 different units, including a tank, firing him as he walks up behind the tank and destroys it. This doesn't seem very well balanced to me. In fact, you can do a defend all order for 2 CP, and once I started using this, basically every turn I could just run directly into enemy fire and be okay most of the time. There is no reason not to just abuse them to completely destroy your opponent. The system could work if they weren't as powerful, or if they're only 1 use per battle, so you could get that mega defense boost, but you'd have to plan and time it correctly on the turn where you really needed it the most. But because you can reuse them every turn, it just makes the combat a lot less interesting because you don't really need clever tactics or to engage with the level concept. Just spam some orders and you're basically an invincible one-hit kill machine. And the game seemingly encourages this playstyle because to get an A rank on these missions, you sometimes need to complete them in like 3 turns. And the meta strategy on almost every map is just to rush the mission objective with scouts and orders. It's the same problem that XCOM 2 had, where the game just forces you to rush every single mission and throw strategy out the window. It just makes each level and mission so much less interesting because you have these really cool concepts like chasing this car through the docks and desperately trying to do as much damage as possible before it gets away. But you can then just walk up and one-shot it with a shock trooper. It left me feeling so deflated because I wanted that experience that the level designers were clearly aiming for me to have. So there's this big disconnect between what the game seemingly is trying to be and what the gameplay experience actually is like. Because you can play in that slower way without relying entirely on orders. However, you'll end up probably getting a D grade on every level, which means you gain less money and less experience, making the game even harder on later levels. Thankfully, there is a slight remedy to this with skirmishes, which are these repeatable battles you can do at any time. So if you need to, you can grind these for money and experience. But that's still not a great solution if you just want to play through the story. Enemy commanders in boss fights can also use orders as well, but not nearly to the same effect, and they mostly just use the occasional heal or accuracy boost. It is still by far my biggest issue with the game, and it really does hurt a lot of the really cool missions. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay is still enjoyable and fun, but you just need to be aware of this issue and work around it. Whilst I think Valkyria Chronicles 1 has the better story, Valkyria Chronicles 4 definitely has the better gameplay, partly because it fixes some of these issues like making orders less powerful and thankfully fixing the god-awful tank controls. I really love that game, so if this video does do well, I'm more than happy to do a similar style one on it. So let me know if you guys want to see that. I mentioned money and experience points a second ago, so now seems like a good point to talk about your headquarters. Post Chapter 2, you can visit the headquarters at any time, and there's a good few things you can do here. The squad barracks is where you can look at your squad and change around their equipment. Your classes will always be equipped with the most advanced form of their weapon that you've researched. However, some enemies do drop special weapons that you can give to a soldier from this screen. The command room is where you can mix around your squad composition, so swapping in and out units depending on your wants and needs. You can even completely empty your squad if you want and try and play through the whole game with just the main characters. The training field is where you use your gathered XP to level up your soldiers. This is done by leveling up classes as a whole, rather than individual soldiers, so 2 snipers will always be at the same level. Advancing to higher levels here also rewards you with new orders and unlocking your unit's battle potentials. The R&D facility is where you spend your money to research and develop new equipment for your squad. It's pretty self-explanatory really. As you progress throughout the game, you unlock new research projects to upgrade things like your guns and uniforms. Something that's really cool is when you reach around halfway down the upgrade tree, the guns split off into different trees, with each one making the gun slightly different. For example, with rifles, one gives a firepower boost, one gives an accuracy boost, and the last gives the enemy a debuff. This is really cool for both replayability and variety, as it lets you choose the weapons that fit into your playstyle the best. These upgrades also change how the weapon looks and sounds, which is awesome. Upgrading the tanks, however, is slightly different. You have multiple different standard linear upgrade paths, like increasing the armor or improving the main gun. However, you also have a big list of slottable upgrades that actually fit inside your tank's equipment grid, and generally, the better the upgrade, the more space it takes up. This is a really cool system and really lets you make your tank how you want it. I usually go for as much accuracy as possible, so I don't lob myself into a black hole in frustration. Moving on, we have Castlefront Street, which is a newspaper you can read that updates with every chapter you play. This is entirely optional, but it's a really cool way to get some extra context and learn more about the state of the war beyond what Squad 7 are involved in. This is also where you can unlock the report-sized stories that I mentioned earlier. Next up is the War Cemetery, which you think is where you go to see who in your squad has perished, but it's actually where you meet this old guy who can teach you new orders in return for XP. His orders are actually a lot more fun than the rest of them, however, things like sniper support and calling down your own mortars, so I think it's a good addition. Finally is the Audience Hall. This unlocks after you save the princess, and here she gives you medals for completing certain in-game milestones. I honestly don't see the point in these, as medals are basically just achievements, so why do I have to go into an entirely separate screen and listen to some dialogue just to get them when I've already completed the requirements? Sure, it's a cool thematic thing, but it just feels a bit pointless. If you're going to include something like this, then at least add in some special dialogue for each medal or something to make it more interesting. Some medals do give you special royal versions of weapons, which is cool, but also pretty funny when you think about it. Can you imagine going into Buckingham Palace to get your OBE from King Charles, and he hands you a fucking assault rifle? Overall, the headquarters is nicely designed, and for the most part, it doesn't waste my time. It would have been cool to have like conversations with different soldiers on my squad, or just some way to interact with them, but considering there are 50 of them, I'm honestly not surprised this isn't a feature. Jumping forward to chapter 13, with a battle which really feels like a conflict from the First World War. You and the Imperials are both in trenches, separated by this mass stretch of no man's land, which gets bombarded at the end of your turn. So you can't leave anybody out there, or they just get smushed. Easier said than done, however, as the enemy trench is protected by Gatling guns that can decimate your units in just a second. The only class really able to cross the gap are shock troopers, which makes it a lot more interesting as due to their lower AP, it's hard to get a lot of them across all in one turn. I had this really cool kind of mini story where one of my shock troopers made it into the enemy trench alone but got taken out. And since the only other shock trooper I had deployed had already crossed the gap on the other side, I had no way of getting a unit across no man's land to save her. Meaning it was this desperate attempt to battle my way through the trenches as fast as I could to save her before an enemy inevitably walked over her and killed her. Somehow, thanks to the efforts of a badass engineer, we managed to get her out of there. Valkyria Chronicles is really good at creating these little personal battle stories that happen organically from the gameplay and your decision making. Sadly, this level also does slightly ruin the mystique of the Valkyria, because when Silvara turns up on the battlefield halfway through the mission, it's a proper like, oh shit moment as you remember how powerful she was before. But she can just be infinitely stun-locked by your tank if you just fire something at her every turn. So she's much more of just a nuisance than any kind of actual credible threat, which is a shame. Chapter 14 is the biggest rollercoaster of a mission in this entire game. This is when Alicia has awakened as a Valkyria, and she just absolutely wrecks shit up, like one-shotting tanks and making the mission an absolute cakewalk. Or so I thought. You see, when you capture the enemy's camp, Alicia passes out, and then you are suddenly surrounded by 2 boss tanks and an endlessly respawning onslaught of units. You've walked right into the enemy's trap, and now you're being attacked from both sides. I feel like I've said it at least once already in this video, but screw it, I'm saying it again. This level is an absolute bitch. You go from this absolute high of walking right through the enemy and feeling the raw power of a Valkyria, and then the absolute low of having to take out 2 boss tanks with infinitely respawning soldiers. And these aren't normal tanks. These absolute bastards are equipped with incendiary mortars that explode onto an area and make any movement in that area deadly. And what do you know, they really enjoy firing it directly onto your base. The fact that I was able to complete this mission on my first try is a goddamn miracle, and it only took me 12 turns of absolute pain and misery. And no, I'm not complaining, I loved every second of it. This mission forces you to step outside your comfort zone, as most missions you're only moving your forces in one direction. However, this one requires you to both defend and attack on 2 separate fronts. And you can't just sit and hide either, because you have to take out these 2 tanks who just sit in the corners of the map and rain fire down upon you. I finally managed to take out the first one with a barely alive Edelweiss, and then snuck up a Lancer by the second one when it moved up. This mission really feels like a skill test for the last quarter of the game, as it somehow only gets more insane from here. This leads us on wonderfully to the second battle of chapter 15. Squad 7 has infiltrated an Imperial stronghold, and now face the Valkyria Silvara in combat. However, she vows to beat them without the use of her Valkyria powers. But to be honest, I think I would rather have her use her big blue god powers, because what she uses instead is somehow even more terrifying. This basically fucking thing, which has the damage and fire rate of a machine gun, but the accuracy and range of a sniper rifle, and dear god, is it terrifying to fight against. The second you move, you're dead. Leave anybody in her range on her turn, insta-death. Even if you take cover, she still has an insane amount of AP and can run all around the battlement to find an angle to shoot you from. Didn't I tell you that boss fights in this game were absolutely insane? The idea of this level is that basically, because she takes no damage from being shot from the front, you must make your way up the battlements on both sides and fight your way to get to her in close range.
Close range.
This honestly might be the best boss fight in the whole game. The amount of units I had that got shot down was absolute insanity, and I really had to consider my strategy here. Apparently my strategy consisted of me setting fire to my own troops, but that's neither here nor there. This unit actually died permanently later in this mission, so maybe this was some kind of cosmic foreshadowing, I don't know. I finally managed to take her out with a combo of a few rifle shots to the back of the head and a blast from the tank's flamethrower. Although sadly, Dallas got absolutely murked in the process. What's also sad is that from here, the levels take a bit of a nosedive in quality. It's like the game is running at a full sprint until the last few meters before the finish line, and then it falls flat on its face. The next mission, Chapter 16, is based around trying to divert the Marmota away from its intended path of the capital city, and instead send it through a minefield valley to hopefully destroy it. It's such a cool idea on paper, like the squad desperately running away from this gigantic tank while doing everything they can to try and delay it and change its course. In reality though, this is the most dull mission in the entire game. To divert the Marmota, all you have to do is shoot these giant explosives to cause a landslide and force it down a different path. The main threat is that if the Marmota catches you, it will instantly kill anybody in its path. However, it moves so little each turn, and even then, you can cause these smaller landslides to slow it down, so you're not in any danger. That would still be fine if you had to battle enemy forces while making your escape, but on this giant map, there is only 6 enemies total. So all you really do in this entire battle is run from one side of the valley to the other, occasionally shooting these explosive barrels. And the mission doesn't end till the Marmota completes its entire path, so in my case, I just ended up waiting like 3 turns for it to finish, as there was nothing left for me to do. It was a cool concept, but the execution just leaves a lot to be desired. The next battle in Chapter 17 is the boss fight against General Jaeger in his super armoured tank. The battle is fine and serves its job, but there's just very little that's memorable about it. The main gimmick is that his tank can be repaired at any enemy camp, so you have to capture them all before you take him on. But I probably would have done that anyway, so it doesn't really change much. His tank can fire smoke rounds to help out his soldiers, but in my case, 9 times out of 10, he shot it in the same spot on the same soldier that never moved, so it didn't really add anything to the fight. Moving on to the penultimate battle of the game, we have Chapter 18, where Squad 7 attacks the Marmota head-on to destroy the Valkov once and for all. Once again, this battle is fairly average, but for the last big battle of the game, it really should be so much more. The main problem is that because your main objective is to destroy the Lance, you really only need to focus on using your tanks and lancers. So the rest of your troops really don't get that much use aside from taking out the few enemy reinforcements that appear each turn. I think a much cooler scenario for the finale of the game would be having the interior of the Marmota be open and explorable. So whilst the tanks fight outside, you can send in your infantry to fight amongst the interiors. That would have given it a much more big final battle feel. I know very little about the development of this game, but I wonder if these last few levels were rushed to completion because they feel a lot less creative and well thought out than earlier in the game. Anyway, the Valkov gets destroyed, and so we head up the top deck of the Marmota for our final confrontation with the artificial Valkyria, Maximilian. And oh boy, I mentioned it before, but this is one of the worst final boss battles of all time. And now, we get to discuss it. So strap the fuck in, kids, it's gonna be a hell of a fucking ride. Pause. Just a quick side note, but I think you can really feel my mental deterioration at this point in the script. The start was so cheery and well spoken, but by now, after 6 days of writing, my brain has just devolved into constant swearing and playground insults. Which of course, if you didn't know, is the natural state of all British people. Okay, back to this fucking boss. How could you get a boss battle this wrong after making some really cool ones earlier in the game? So, basically the way this boss works is that on the start of your turn, Max will be connected to 3 of these conduits. And once he's connected, he cannot take any damage. So, what you have to do is destroy the 3 conduits, and from there, you can then damage him. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, here's where the fun begins. First off, the 3 conduits he's attached to are seemingly random each turn, and each one of them needs to be destroyed in a certain way. The front 2 could just be destroyed by normal bullets, but it will take more than 1 turn with a shock trooper, so that's 2 CP gone. The middle 2 are armoured and can only be destroyed by anti-tank weaponry. This takes 2 hits from a lancer or 1 hit from the Edelweiss, so either way that's another 2 CP gone. The back two are like the front two and can be taken out usually with a Lancer shot, so that's another CP gone. And then the one furthest at the back can be taken out with a single sniper bullet, which costs another CP. So, if you get lucky with which ones get selected, that's only 3 CP to take them out. However, if you get unlucky, then it's 6 CP to take them out. That's no biggie, however, because if you deploy all your CP boosting units, then you have 12 CP each turn, which means you have at least another 6 CP to deal damage to him, so what's the problem? That's in a perfect world where you have no problems, as remember, your soldiers can miss. Say either your snipers or lancers miss the shot, well that's potentially another 1 or 2 CP used up. Okay, well that's still not bad.
But wait! There's more!
Well no, because you've forgotten all about Maximilian, who not only deals an insane amount of interception fire damage, but also gets 2 CP on his own turn, where you can use this giant laser beam attack to deal massive damage to multiple of your troops, as well as your tanks. So to live through any of this, you practically need to use a defend all order each turn to keep your troops alive, so that's another 2 CP gone. And don't forget, you'll need to use another CP for an engineer to heal your tank and restock your lancer's ammo. Unless he attacks the tank twice in his turn, in which case it costs 2 CP to get your tank back up to full. Okay. So after all that, on a good turn, when you don't miss, you're usually left with around 4 CP. That's still okay though, that's 4 shock troopers unloading on him each turn, that's surely enough to kill him. Oh shit. Okay, it made you basically no damage, but surely flamethrowers will do more. Oh shit. What about a direct lancer hit? Oh shit. Okay, what if I use an attack boost? Surely that's the strategy here. Oh, fuck you, Max. Okay. I may do absolutely piss all damage, but that's fine, I can just whittle down his health over the course of a few turns. Wait. Why is his health back up to full? Oh, you've got me taking the fucking piss! Yes, Max restores around a quarter of his health every turn. So not only can you not whittle down his health slowly over time, if you get a bad turn where you can't deal any damage, you basically lose almost all of your progress in the fight. Now do you see why I fucking hate this bullshit fight? And of course he's got a fucking second phase where he unlocks this mega fuck you move that damages everything around him, even through cover, so you can't defend against it. Because of course he does, why the fuck not? Dear God, I'm sorry for getting angry, but I literally remember playing this in 2016 and messaging my friends on Discord who had already completed the game, being like, what the actual fuck is this crap? Why is this absolute balls? Okay. Calm down. Breathe in. And out. So, how did I eventually beat this turd? Well, I figured out the best way to damage him was the Aloys's mortar, as that did far more damage than any other weapon I had, so I relied on that. I also worked out that I could use co-op attacks on the towers at the front to save a CP each turn. Even still, this battle was an absolute nightmare and took me 18 turns and over an hour to finally beat. I know I'm probably going to get comments calling me a soy boy and weak because I don't like hard bosses, but truth be told, I prefer hard games usually. I've played my fair share of Dark Souls 3 and love the feeling in games when you finally defeat a difficult boss that took you a bunch of tries to finally overcome. But there is no skill here. When I eventually completed it, I didn't feel like I'd grown my skills and finally been good enough to win. I just felt drained, like I'd been on the phone with an insurance company for an hour. The whole battle is just so poorly designed mechanically and relies so much on RNG that there's just zero fun to be had here. And it's such a damn shame because Valkyria Chronicles has some of my favourite bosses and levels in any game, and this is the one that closes it out. Thankfully, I can try and quickly forget about it, because like I said before, the ending cutscene with the plane is genuinely very sweet and ends the game on a much nicer note. Okay, before we move on to talking about characters, there's just a few more general gameplay issues that I want to bring up. For starters, whenever you transition from the map screen to taking control of your soldier, the camera does this big spinning move, but it always seems to take the longest rotation possible, and it can become very nauseating when the camera is constantly spinning like 300 degrees. The radio chatter that you hear from your side is really cool and can give you some good tips on whatever mission you're playing. However, the enemy has a serious lack of voice lines. You'll hear, "Oh, who are these guys?" like 10 times a mission, and that's not an exaggeration.
Who are these guys? Who are these guys? Who are these guys? Who are these guys?
It would have been cool if these changed over the course of the game. Like the Imperials not knowing who you are at the start of the game, but as your squad gets more and more well known, they start recognizing you on the battlefield. It just feels a little silly that they're asking who you are when you're the most famous squad of the militia and attacking the leader of the invasion's main tank. The enemy AI can be a bit dumb sometimes. You'll often see especially snipers taking their turn just to run out from cover and then run right back in again. And they'll sometimes do this multiple times in a row. Because of the stylized look of the map view, it can sometimes be pretty difficult to relate it to the actual battlefield. And often on a new level, I'll take my first character move just to look around and get my bearings. When characters trigger certain potentials, it plays a little voice line and an animation. This can get a bit annoying, especially for some characters like Largo, who have one trigger almost every single time you select him, and you just gotta stop and wait for a few seconds while it plays. Okay, that was probably the longest chapter I'm ever gonna write in any video, until I do my 18-hour Bloons Tower Defense 6 retrospective. If you're still here, then thank you very much for sticking with me, as now we can move on to discussing the characters. Let's start off with Welkin Gunther. One of the things I do love about Welkin is that he's very far from your typical gruff, strong male protagonist that we've seen in dozens and dozens of games over the years. He's a very sweet and gentle soul that is plunged into a world of hatred and suffering, and seeing him deal with that makes him a very interesting protagonist. Right as he's introduced, it's very clear what Welkin's favourite thing in the world is: nature. Alicia suspects him of being a spy because he's sketching fish into his notebook and it looks very suspicious. He can often be oblivious and go off on tangents about bugs and such, like realising that other people aren't interested. Welkin is also an excellent leader who pulls out some incredible victories thanks to his tactical brain. My favourite example of this is near the start of the game, where Rosie and Largo doubt his abilities as their squad leader. So Welkin makes a bet with them that if he can't capture a bridge in 48 hours, then he'll resign as leader. So he pulls out this absolute baller move of driving his tank along the bottom of the riverbed to surprise the enemy. He reminds me a lot of Sokka from The Last Airbender. Both tactical geniuses who also have a goofy side to them. That show is my favourite piece of media ever created, so any comparison to it is a massive compliment. Literally, the first note I wrote for the character section is, Welkin is so damn likeable, which I think says a lot. His relationship with Alicia is also incredibly sweet, as they clearly like each other a lot throughout the game, and both make kind of subtle allusions to it, but never seem to fully reveal their feelings for each other, until Welkin proposes to her to bring her out of her Valkyria state. But Jesus fuck, I thought I was done talking about difficult missions. But then we come to Welkin's report, where Squad 7 must defend a Darksin refugee camp from an Imperial force. This is really the only mission in the game where you're entirely on the defensive, with your objectives being to either neutralise all enemies or hold out for 8 turns for the refugees to escape. You're only given 5 units, and unlike the majority of the game where the enemy are mostly reactionary and only start moving and attacking when you trigger them, in this mission the full force of the enemy immediately start barreling towards you with 3 tanks accompanying them. I'm not joking when I say I probably got at least 5 or 6 game overs on this mission, and it took me around an hour and a half to finish. Notice, however, that I'm not saying this mission is bad, because it isn't at all. It's just that defending in this game is very hard, because with only 5 troops, I had to send them out onto the field to take out the enemies. But what the enemy does, which is super clever, is send scouts to crawl around the side through the grass and take the camp from behind you. And it only takes 1 enemy to touch it for a game over. And interception fire didn't help much because they would just sprint past you and stay alive, so actually defending wasn't much of an option. So it was a lot of trial and error, but I managed it eventually. Each report also gives the character their final personal potential, which is a really cool reward. For Welkin, it gives him a stat boost when he's near Alicia, which is very wholesome. Overall, Welkin is a really awesome main character, and a great audience surrogate that doesn't fall into the tired trope of tough military guy. Next up we have Alicia. When we first meet her, she's the tough, no-nonsense head of the town guard, who arrests Welkin thinking he's an Imperial spy. But after they fight off the Imperials together, her and Welkin gets talking, and he finds out that she's actually a very sweet girl, with dreams of becoming a baker. They work so well together, and their chemistry is apparent right off the bat, with their conversations being some of the best throughout the game. Once she joins the squad and opens up a bit more, Welkin learns that Alicia is in fact an orphan, who has never known a family. And there's a very sweet moment when Alicia talks about Squad 7 being the only family she's ever known. And you really feel it after they've all grown closer together throughout the war. The really interesting stuff starts once you learn that Alicia is actually a Valkyria and she's awakened. She's horrified by her new power and feels like more of an outsider than ever. However, I'm going to save that stuff for a later segment of the video, so make sure you stick around. Her report is set right after the desert mission where you visit the Valkyria temple. After the report battle, Alicia is wounded from a gunshot to the arm. Later that night, when Folio goes to speak to Welkin in the Squad 7 tent, he finds them all asleep. However, just before he leaves, he sees Alicia emitting a strange blue glow. And the next morning, she's completely healed from her wound, which is Folio's first tip that she may be more than meets the eye. Completing this report also gives her a potential that will occasionally heal her back up to max health mid-mission. I really like Alicia and think she's a great addition to the game. Now we come on to Rosie, who might very well be the best written character in the game. When we first meet her, she immediately gets off on the wrong foot by making it clear that she hates Darksons and spends much of the first half of the game antagonizing and throwing slurs at Isara. They even almost come to blows a few times, which has to be broken up by Welkin. Isara stands her ground against Rosie, however, and slowly chips away against her prejudices. A big moment for change in Rosie's character is seeing the aftermath of the Darkson concentration camp fire. For the first time in her life, she sees them as fellow human beings, and not just the stereotype that she's had firmly planted in her head for years. It's also her conversations with the Darkson Zaka, who meets her with love and acceptance, that really starts to change her. She still holds onto her old ways, however, when rejecting a gift from Isara and throwing another slur at her. But this is purely just a defensive reaction, as she tells Largo after Isara has left that she wants to apologise, but doesn't know how and can't change overnight. After the next battle, Rosie finally owns up to Isara and wants to repay her for her gift, letting her choose anything she wants in return. Isara asks to hear Rosie sing, as she was a singer before the war. And as all seems right and these two can finally move on as friends and family, Isara is shot and killed right in front of her. Rosie takes the death of Isara harder than anyone, even Welkin, and in a beautiful scene, she sings at Isara's funeral whilst holding the doll she received as a gift.
You stood, always smiling, ever quiet, ever tender, and I, a lost child, always frightened. I remember that you came and found me, blinded by unshed tears.
This is when Rosie truly changes, lets go of her hate and treats Darksons as people. She carries the spirit of Isara with her for the rest of the game, and it's honestly beautifully done. Rosie's redemption is an amazing story of how people can truly change each other for the better and make the world a better place. It's honestly incredibly well done and honestly very brave to start off one of your main characters being so unlikable and hateable, but then give them an excellent redemption and hopefully inspire some change in our real world. I know some people might not consider this a big thing, but I love how this game is firmly anti-racist and displays all the people who hate Darksons as illogical and misguided. We need more of this. Rosie's character arc is completed during her report, when she and Squad 7 take down an Imperial ethnic cleansing force heading for a Darkson village. She reveals that her hatred comes from the fact that her family were all killed as collateral damage during one of the Empire's Darkson hunts, showing how truly misguided her prejudice was. She then talks to this young Darkson boy and spreads Isara's wish for a better world where all people are equal. It's a very touching scene and really tugs at the heartstrings when after this mission, Rosie gets a new potential that gives her a stat boost when near Darksons as it reminds her of Isara. The epilogue reveals that after the war, Rosie became a famous singer who spreads peace through her music, and that she returns to visit Isara's grave every year. Rosie is one of the best characters in this game and sends out an excellent message that I think we can all emulate. We are much stronger together than we are divided. Largo is one of the other main characters in the squad, but he definitely has the least presence out of any of them. He's a veteran of EW1 and therefore the oldest in the group, so is dubbed the Grandpa by Welkin. He's a cool character, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't really have any kind of arc or major story significance. In fact, his report is more of a joke mission about his love of vegetables, which gives him the Veggie Maniac potential. He does have an interesting relationship with the captain of the regiment, Eleanor Varrot, that comes up a lot during her report, but I'll save that for her section. There's honestly just not much to say about him other than he's a pretty solid and level-headed presence for the squad throughout the story. Isara is one of the best characters in the game, despite only being in the first half of it. She's an essential character to have, as she's our vehicle for understanding Darksons and their culture. I love that she stands her ground against Rosie and fights for her people, despite all the shit that she faces. She frequently also dispels myths about Darksons, like the supposed Darkson calamity, which people use as justification for their racism against them. Outside of talking about her people, she's generally very softly spoken and quiet, spending a lot of her time working on her engineering projects. She has a great amount of love and respect for her big brother Welkin, despite them not being blood related. That's why she's working on the airplane, as Welkin has always wanted to be able to fly. It's utterly tragic that she gets taken so young and before she can fulfill her brother's dream. Whilst in body she may be gone, her spirit carries Squad 7 through the rest of the game, and her mission for peace and unity did not die with her. She doesn't get her own report sadly, but I think it could be really cool to play as her as an engineer. I really like Isara, and her death fundamentally changes the rest of the squad and how they see the rest of the war, as well as I think do the players. Also, apparently she's voiced by Laura Bailey, which I had no idea about. I swear to God, I can't play a single video game without hearing at least one of the Critical Role cast, as I know that Liam O'Brien is in this game as well as one of your units. How do they keep finding me? Captain Varrot serves as your authority figure and mission giver throughout the game. She's the one who gives you your orders and briefs you on the missions you're about to face. She's much more than that, however, and there's a surprising amount of depth to her character. While she may appear to be very stern and stubborn at the start, she opens up a lot the more time she spends with Squad 7, even going with them for their beach trip. Captain Farot has a great respect for the militia and gets frustrated when army commanders like General Damon look down upon them. She was actually with Largo in the militia during EW1, so they share a close bond to this day. Early in the game, Largo brings up someone called Frederick, which gets quickly shut down by the captain. It is revealed in her report that there was actually a third member of their group named Frederick, who was romantically involved with Varot. However, during the war, he was captured by the sadistic Imperial officer Geld and tortured to death. When the war is over, Varot stayed in the militia in hopes of tracking him down and getting revenge. Geld has been reported holding some Gallian civilians hostage, so Varot sends in Squad 7 to save them and capture Geld. You see a very different side to her in this mission, as the usually well-mannered and stoic captain is fraught with emotion and pure hatred for this man who took her lover away from her. When he's finally captured, she wants to immediately execute him on the spot. Largo tries to calm her down, but in doing so, he creates by far the funniest moment in this game.
Nothing else left.
Don't do this, Elle.
I swear to God, I cannot watch that moment without pissing myself laughing. It's a really good report and cutscene, but the out of nowhere bitch slap is so fucking funny. Okay, okay, calm down. Oh, absolute fucking gold. Largo finally convinces her that it's not what Frederick would have wanted, and so she spares Geld. Varot is a really welcome presence throughout the game, and the epilogue shows that her and Largo got married and lived peacefully on a farm together. Let's just hope there's a lot less of this. Zaka is the leader of the resistance that you meet in the Darkson concentration camp. He then becomes part of Squad 7 and pilots his tank, the Shamrock, for the rest of the game. Zaka can very much be seen as the replacement for Isara as the player's way of understanding the Darksons, seeing as how he's introduced only one mission before Isara's death. However, I still like him as a character and think he's a cool guy to have around. He has a super awesome introduction to the story as the leader of this resistance, and after the Empire burns the camps down with the people still inside them, Zaka has this really awesome speech about how his people don't take revenge and the only thing worth dying for is peace.
Somebody tell me who did this. I'll tear their stinking heads off.
And what would that accomplish?
Revenge, that's what?
Fight fire with fire? An eye for an eye? Didn't enough people die today? Even if our traditions lead us to death at the hands of others, we don't respond with violence. When we die for peace. That is how the Darkson live their lives.
Now those lives are gone. Forever.
But why?
I could hate them, maybe even kill them, but that wouldn't bring those people back. All I can really do is try to survive and help the ones who are still here.
He doesn't get a report, so he's a little underdeveloped, but I still appreciate his presence. After the war, he returns home to his city and builds a toy factory, hoping to bring a smile to all the children who lost their families in the conflict. I never really gave him much focus during my first playthrough, but during this one I came to absolutely love Foldio and decided to name him Garlean Batman. Because this guy is an amazing detective, and I'm going to be bold here, Foldio did nothing wrong. His story in the game is super interesting, and you can actually find some hints to what he's doing. After he figures out that Alicia is a Valkyria and takes his leave from the militia, you can then read in the newspaper about someone breaking into a museum and stealing the Valkyria lance and shield artifacts that he himself had uncovered during his time as an archaeologist. You also see in a cutscene him figuring out how Valkyria can only awaken their power on the brink of death. So when Alicia gets shot, you can already have a pretty good guess about who it is before the reveal. And he is correct, and Alicia awakening saves possibly thousands of Garlean soldiers from death. So I say once again, Foldio did nothing wrong. He even then breaks out of military prison and sneaks his way onto the Marmota to save Squad 7 in the final battle. Once again, he is Batman. I will admit though, that him taking himself out as well to kill Maximilian, it's a bit dumb. He could have easily just kicked him off, but I understand that he wanted to atone for what he did to Alicia. Please someone make a Foldio skin for Batman Arkham Knight. He also has some really interesting insights into the war, like not trusting the Federation at all and claiming that they'd be just as likely to invade Gallia if the Empire didn't get there first. He honestly might be my favourite character, and I would love for a future game to revolve around him if he maybe survived. Maximilian is our main antagonist of the game, and I think he does a fairly serviceable job. He's not exactly the most unique or nuanced villain in the world, but there's enough depth to him to keep him interesting throughout the story. He initially comes off as just another generic Nepo baby brat who's leading the Guardian invasion to aid his father's mission. However, Throughout the game, you get more hints about his true origin and motivations. Just before you battle him, he reveals that he is in fact only the bastard son of the Emperor, and that the other heirs tried to assassinate him. And whilst he survived, his mother didn't. This fueled a great anger inside of Max, and so he decided to get his revenge against the Empire by gaining as much power as possible so that he can be the only one to rule it. This was in fact the real reason for the Garlean invasion, so that he could harness the power of the Valkyrian artifacts. He ended up also managing to turn himself into an artificial Valkyria, giving him the power he so desperately sought, until he was obviously thwarted by Squad 7. Maximilian is generally shown to be cold and distant, not really caring for anybody else but himself, and not even hesitating to send Silvaria off to her death to further his own ambitions. He also always refers to himself in the third person, which I find pretty interesting. So yeah, I think he serves his purpose fairly decently. I'd probably like him a lot more though if it wasn't for that fucking boss fight though. General Jaeger is one of the other leaders of the Garlean invasion. However, he's not your typical loyal Imperial soldier. In fact, he actually hates the Empire, so why is he fighting for them? Well, he comes from the country of Ferald, which was conquered by the Empire during the First European War, and Maximilian has promised Jaeger that if he fights for him as one of his generals, then his country will gain its independence. This is a really interesting motivation for a villain, and one that makes him a cool character to fight against. Jaeger isn't in the game a massive amount, but the times that you do see him let you know that this guy is a complete badass. Not only does he stand up to Max and challenge him on the things that he says, but when you defeat him in combat, he refuses to return to Max and walks off vowing to free his country by himself. Gregor is one of the other leaders of Maximilian's Garlean invasion. A rich aristocrat, he's basically just a super Nazi with no redeeming qualities whatsoever. He has so little screen time that I wasn't even going to mention him, but there's actually two things I want to bring up about him. The first being that I always thought he was the same character as the enemy captain Elysian welcomed me in the forest after they buried the enemy soldier. I think just because they look similar. And secondly, I actually made a model of Gregor for part of my first year university assignment. And here it is! The fact that I was given a degree after presenting this monstrosity really says a lot about the British education system. Now, at the end of this section, I just want to go over some of my favourite members of Squad 7 I used during this playthrough because they're a lot of fun. Marina was my absolute goat on this playthrough. She's a sniper who basically hates other people and gets a ton of bonuses when there are no other allies around her. In this whole campaign, she didn't miss a single shot. Cherry was one of my main scouts outside Alicia, and she was great for two reasons. One, because her Valley Girl accent is very funny.
Like, duh!
And two, because she gets a boost when nearby to Rosie. There's even unique dialogue when Rosie calls the medic for her and uses her actual name.
Just a little longer, almost there. Come on, pull through, Cherry.
I've also got to give a shout out to Claudia and Ramsey for being my go-to engineering pair. They kept the squad alive more times than I can count. And finally, Melville, who should have been killed about 16 times but always managed to bounce back and survive the whole campaign. Something else I want to note is just how young most of these guys are. I'd say at least half your available soldiers are under the age of 18, which is pretty horrific that so many of these kids are going off to their potential deaths. When you read that, the war hits you a lot harder. The game is also surprisingly progressive for a game from 2008, with a few characters having potentials of liking the same sex, like the engineer Dallas, who gets a stat boost when around other female soldiers. I do however take issue with the Lancer Jan, who does just feel like a blatant stereotype of gay men that really shouldn't have made it into the 21st century. Okay, so now that we've gone through every major character, what's next? Well, I haven't been entirely honest with you. There are actually two more characters left to speak about. However, their stories are deeply entwined to what I believe is the true main theme of this game. So that's what we'll be discussing in our final section. On the surface, you may think that the main message of Valkyria Chronicles is war equals bad. And whilst yes, that is a theme, I believe that the game has a much more underlying theme that I've never really seen anyone talk about. And it's actually a phrase that's repeated multiple times throughout the game by a few different characters. Find your calling. First, let's look at Princess Cordelia, the teenage ruler of Gallia who was put into this position while still just a child due to the death of her parents. The Gallian royal family are believed to be direct descendants of the Valkyria, so their bloodline is treated as sacred. When we first meet her, she's very softly spoken and proper. You get the impression that she's been controlled and told what to do her whole life, so in essence, she is completely shut down as her own person. It isn't until a conversation she has with Welkin till she really starts to consider that she can make her own choices and not be confined to her role as just the princess. The other character is Silvaria, the Valkyria Imperial General. It is revealed in conversation that she was experimented on her entire life because of her bloodline, and only saved from that wretched existence when Max rescued her for use on the Gallian front. So, including Alicia, What do all three of these characters have in common? All three of them believe that their lives are already decided by their Valkyrian blood, and that there is nothing they can do to escape their fate as Valkyria. For Selvaria, she believes that her life can be nothing else other than to serve Maximilian and do whatever he orders her to do. She's in essence an abuse victim who believes that her power is the sole purpose for her existence, and without using it to serve Maximilian, she has no purpose. And she brings this to her grave as she goes forth with Max's orders and detonates herself to take out the Gallian army. However, just before she goes, she has a really interesting conversation with Alicia. She asks her what her purpose is now that Alicia is Valkyria, and Alicia says that she doesn't know, and the fact that she isn't sure scares her. And just before Selvaria is taken away, she asks Alicia to think what cause will her life ultimately serve. She puts in her head that the only life a Valkyria can lead is as a weapon of mass destruction. And Alicia believes this. Ever since she found out about her true nature, she was terrified of it, believing that she's a monster. So when the unstoppable Momota is barreling towards the capital city, she realizes that this is her purpose. This moment is what her life has been building towards. As she prepares to take down the Momota and herself with it, she claims that Alicia is dead and only a Valkyria remains. Until Welkin gets to her and tells her that she is more than just a Valkyria. She's still the same person that she's always been, and nothing about her has changed. It's only Welkin's unconditional love that makes her see that there is more to her life than just being a weapon, and that her blood does not define her. And it's tragic that Selvaria may have been able to see this as well, if only she actually had someone who cared about her as a human being, rather than just a tool for war. Princess Cordelia also has this revelation, as after Rangris is assaulted by the Empire, and Maximilian plans to take her as his bride to use her Valkyrian blood, she reveals that the royal family is in fact not Valkyrian, but actually Darkson. And were it not for the kind words of Welkin, she would have continued on living in the comfort of the destiny that was decided for her. But now, she takes control, and that living by her own will is her one and true calling. These three characters believe that the Valkyrian bloodline decided their entire lives from birth, but two of them were given the love and support they needed to break out of this and find their own calling. I think this is such an awesome theme for a game. And it doesn't just have to stay in this game. I hope that this game and this video can help you understand that you are in no way defined by the circumstances of your birth. Whether it's your race, gender, sexuality, disability, social class, whatever it is, you have the ability to take control and find your own purpose in life. Obviously, it's going to be very different for your specific circumstances, and I'm in no way saying it's easy or simple, but I truly believe that your calling is out there for you, and one day you will have the strength to go out and find it. And there's one last secret that I've kept from you. There is one last cutscene in this game that plays after the credits. We see Welkin walking through Brule, now a school teacher who is beloved by his students. In the middle of the town square, we see a truck with a sign saying, Alicia's Bakery, the dream she always wanted. Welkin and Alicia, now married, have a talk about their respective days, until another person emerges from the truck. Their daughter, Isara. Alicia and Welkin then walk off with their daughter, moving on from the memories of the war that took so much from both of them, but both of them having found their calling. So, Valkyria Chronicles, 17 years later, does it still hold up? I think it absolutely does. While some of the gameplay may feel a bit outdated now and some of the missions can be cheesed with cheap strategies and order spamming, I still think this is a heartwarming and uplifting story that everybody should experience. My name is Nosemasher, thank you for listening to me, and have a wonderful day. Jesus Christ, this video was far too long. Hey guys, so I don't usually do my rambly kind of outros anymore, but I thought I'd do one for this video because it's so special. This is actually the second time I'm recording it. I did an entire one where I was very emotional, did it, but I forgot to record because I'm an idiot. So this is take two. So I've got a few things to address. First off, if you are at this point, if you're watching this, thank you so much for watching an hour and a half of me talking about a weird anime game from 2008 that no one's ever heard of. It genuinely means a lot to me. This video was an absolute labour of love, and it did take absolutely ages, but I'm so glad it's now actually coming out. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so if you did get this far, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. It would really help out the channel. I'm probably not going to do a video this long again for a while because it took so long. I enjoyed doing it, but it took so long to do. So I'm probably going to do a few shorter videos in time in the next few ones, so some sub 20-minute ones. Unless this video does extremely well, in which case I will just pivot to doing only this kind of content. So I'll do another one of these on Valkyria Chronicles 4. If this video gets 10 views, I'll do that. No, if it blows me away, I will do that. Very sorry for the audio troubles. This mic is a piece of shit, and it picks up every tiny mouth movement I make and any kind of tiny noise in the room, and I can't figure out a way to get it to stop. So I try and edit out as much as possible, but I'm very sorry if you hear horrible mouth noises. Trust me, I'm gonna hate them more than anyone else. There was a lot of swearing in this video, especially during the Maximilian boss fight section, because that bit got me very, very heated. So if you're watching this now and you've just watched the video and it's all bleeped out, that's because YouTube either demonetized me or age restricted me. So I had to go through and bleep it all out. So if you heard a lot of swearing, then yes, YouTube let me have the video. Lastly, I would just like to thank That Boy Aqua on YouTube. I'll put a link to his channel here. I came to him with some asking help, and he was more than kind, helped me out with things like YouTube, with thumbnails and titles. He didn't have to do that. I had nothing to offer him, but he did it out of the kindness of his heart. So if you like my stuff, go watch his stuff. It's similar to mine and much higher quality. But other than that, genuinely, thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, it was an absolute labor of love. I'm very damn proud of this video and how it turned out. So just thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me that you watched an hour and a half of my stuff from someone you've most likely never even heard of. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.